maybe turn it off.
Can you?
I don't know. Yeah, check on your phone. Just open it up. You say there's no sound. That's a shame. Well, turn it off and on again if it's not working. But, in any case, yes, this idea that hard Jesus. So I think it's from the Talmud as well, but it's definitely in the Rishonim. This idea that there are some cheeses which have such a strong taste. Huh? It is working. It is working.
Maybe
your sound is low, maybe. These hard cheeses, they have such a strong taste that you have to treat them like it's meat, and you have to wait 6 hours. Between these milk, even though it's milk to meat, you have to wait 6 hours. There is such a halacha, and it's true. But what I was taught is that we don't really have those kind of cheeses so commonly. Those cheeses, they're like
Gouda or
yeah, all the cheeses that we have, they're not really like processed for 6 months to a year, and the taste is not so strong, even though they're hard.
right.
Not all hard cheeses have the status of halachic hard cheeses. As a matter of fact, I heard that none of them do. But I'm not 100% sure. Maybe now we have more different kinds of kosher cheeses that are being made. But it is true that on the books there is such a concept. Hard cheeses you have to be machmir about. But I don't think it applies to every hard cheese in the book. Yeah.
And there's a standard, because I heard that maybe like an hour or something. Because this is the first time I've heard of the whole hard cheese thing.
Hard cheese is 6 hours. No, as far as I know, it's like treating it like meat.
And that's like based on like your custom how it is for meat, or that's for
Yeah, it's based on whatever, because the idea of the meat is that it gets stuck between your teeth, and the meat taste is so strong that it stays in your mouth for longer, and that's where the custom became that we do 6 hours. But in terms of hard cheeses, as far as I understand, that we don't have those kind of hard cheeses anymore.
Technology and the way things are done now.
Yeah, the way it's processed. Yeah,
So
it's
it's
just
not
different. It's not a practical law.
Anymore.
Yeah.
So nowadays most hard cheeses are
Just half an hour, or wash your mouth out, even for hard cheeses. Yeah.
What's about the cheese with mushrooms?
What about it?
Is it kosher?
Why not?
This kind of French cheese that like has like penicillin inside, penicillin.
Listen, we're not going to go into all the laws of kashrut, but it is very interesting, and I don't see any prohibition of putting mushrooms in cheese. You can put all sorts of nice herbs in cheese, and you can all sorts of cheeses. The thing is with cheese is that you have to have kosher cheese. Cheese has to be processed by Jews.
So it's not a problem if the cheese got some mushrooms growing in it.
No,
Okay, nice.
no. Mushrooms are kosher. Mushrooms. Be careful that they're not poisonous. But other than that, or they don't. The other kind of shrooms, if you know what I mean. Got to stay away from those.
Which from
the happy ones.
Psilocybin and all those kind of things. We don't want those. That's not our way. Okay. All right. We're going to learn the next chapter is the laws of. Chapter 11 is the laws not of the malacha of cooking, but the law of separating. Borer. The laws of Borer are. We're gonna do them very quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on them. But because there's actually not just one malacha, but 4 malachot. Look on page 205. Okay, Yosef, will you start us off?
4 malachot related to borer. There are 4 malachot that deal with separating ochel, food, from solid, waste. Dash, threshing, zoreh, winnowing, borer, separating, and menachem, sifting. The malacha of dash involves detaching food matter from its husk. The malacha is named for the act of detaching kernels of grain from their stalks and chaff. After the grain was harvested and gathered, its stalks were beaten with flails in order to separate the kernels of grain from them. When there was an abundance of grain, threshing was done by having an animal walk on the stalks over a hard surface. To make that threshing more efficient, A wide board with blades or stones attached to it would be attached to the animal. The animal would pull this board over the stalks, and this would separate the kernels from the stalks. Those of the Menachem will be explained below. After threshing, some straw in half would remain mixed with the kernels. In order to remove this, they would winnow the grain in the wind. That is, they would toss the mixture in there with the dedicated instrument, and the wind would blow away the lighter half and straw, while the heavier kernels would fall back to the ground. This is the Malacha of Zorah. The remaining pile would still contain stones and clumps of earth, which would be removed by hand. This is the Melacha of Borer. After this, the wheat would be ground into flour. But because the outer layer of the wheat kernel, called the bran, is coarse, grinding process would result in a mixture of flour and coarse particles of bran. In order to separate the flour from the bran, the flour would be sifted with a sieve. This finer flour would filter through the sieve while the bran remains on its surface. This is the Melacha of Menachem.
Okay, so stop there. Take a look here at the pictures that we have. This is the Melacha of Dash. We can see that they're separating. It's hard to see, but we'll pass it around in a minute. This man is standing on a board that's being pulled in the threshing floor. It's called threshing, Dash. It's being pulled over the wheat stalks that have been gathered up. Why is he doing that? Because you could see on the bottom of the board, there's actually spikes. And those spikes sever the kernel from the long stem. You want to make the wheat only with the kernels, not with the stems. So that's threshing. That's separating a fruit from where it grows. And then we have the next type of separating. What they did is winnowing. You can see that in the original time, winnowing was done with the aid of the wind. You sort of lifted up the wheat into the air, and the wind would come and blow away the lighter chaff. That's just the coverings. That's another type of separating. Then there was separating here called borer. Here, you're using your hand just to pick out the stones. There's stones that got mixed in. You have to take the stones out from the kernels. The last, this is, so 1, 2, and 3 different melachot. We're going to learn the practical applications of that. There was one more stage when they did separating, and that was after they ground the kernels, which have already been separated in 3 stages. After you have flour, they would once again sift it in a sieve. The flour gets sifted. So that's a 4th melacha that is also separating the good from the bad. You know what whole wheat flour looks like as opposed to white flour. Whole wheat flour, it has all those kernels of bran. It's not been sifted through to leave you with only the flour without the bran. So this is 4 melachot that have to do with separating. Okay? Now how does that apply to our life? I don't usually do farming on Shabbat for sure. So I don't think I've ever harvested wheat. I don't think I've ever threshed or winnowed or, separating though, I do. Separating I do. Let's see what the practical applications are. Well, can you give me an idea? What would be a practical application of separating?
In Shabbat?
On Shabbat. Something that's in our lives, not on the farm.
In food.
Food? Why do you separate your food?
Say if you wanted the ochel and you wanted to separate
Ochel is food.
Solid. Let's say I don't
You're
want
just using terms for me. I want practical life. Give me life. When in your lifetime do you have a need to separate things? On Shabbat. Don't use the fancy terms. Ochel psolet. We're gonna get to that. Give me real life. Clothes.
Holy books by its kind.
Holy books by its kind. Okay, well, you guys are so holy. You're dealing with books. It's good. You read books? Wow. Very nice. You're such an intellectual. Oh, I read books too. I like books. But clothing. Separating clothing. Right. This is, I'm going to wear this one, not going to wear that one. Something like that. That's what you meant? What other example?
Some people say when you eat thing, don't choice. Get the food, you just
Sure. Sometimes I get served, and they gave me some rice, but in the rice there's peas. Who likes peas? I don't like peas, so I want to pick the peas out and get rid of them, and I just want to have the rice, right? Or any other kind of food like that. What else? Give me another example that you might be separating or want to be separating things on Shabbat.
Playing cards.
Playing cards. Good. Yeah. Sorry.
should be the cold the dressing prepare before supper. Don't choice which one you put.
Right. Good. Like Ezra said, choosing between clothing. That's a selecting. You're separating.
Separate men and women in Beit Knesset.
Men and women in the Beit Knesset. Okay. Listen, no, seriously, there could be separation if you're choosing up a team. You're on this team. You're on that team. So, what is considered to be prohibited, based on these agricultural examples, and how do we translate that to our lives? Which one of the examples that you mentioned actually have a problem halachically? So, in order to help us, let's get some of the basic definitions, and then we'll see some practical examples. First of all, the first basic reality that you have to have is a mixture. If you have a pile of peas on your plate, and separately you have a pile of rice on the other side of the plate, and you eat only the rice, that's not a problem. You're not separating anything. They're not mixed in. The question becomes when you have the peas and the rice mixed. So when you have a mixture, then it becomes a question. Okay, so first of all, we're looking for a mixture. That's why I'm not sure every time you have books on the table, they're not always in a mixture. It's a debate whether or not books, like I have a stack here of books, okay, so is that a mixture? Well, one is about the laws of Shabbat. This is the Talmud. This is the Kuzari, and this is a book of Halacha. So it is somewhat a mixture, but each one is sitting very separate from each other. It's not like the peas and the rice, which are sort of intermingled, and you can't really separate them easily. Here, you take one book, you take another book. Some debate whether or not this is considered to be a mixture. But the first principle you have to know is that really the problematic parts is when you have a mixture. Okay? Principle number one.
Question.
Yeah.
Talking about separate. Talking about the eye or hand. For example, I want to choice this book, but I don't move that choice. Or
Good. So that brings us to the second rule. The second rule is that, as we saw in the agricultural melacha, the definition is that when you had a mixture of kernels together with stones, and with your hand, you actually do an action of picking out the stones from the kernels. What that means is, basically you have a mixture of things you want and things you don't want. The things you want, even if it's not for eating, we call it ochel. That's the desired part of the mixture. And what you don't want is called pesolet. Put the words on the board for you, okay? Psolet. Psolet means refuse or rubbish. Okay, we're done with cooking. You guys all know how to cook or not to cook on Shabbat. So we're talking about now borer. Borer means separating. So first of all, we have to have a mixture. And then you want to take out the ochel, me, from psolet. Okay? Ochel means the good from the bad. Now, I don't want to offend anybody who likes peas. There's nothing bad about peas. But for me now, I don't like peas. And I want to get my rice without the peas. So for me, this is relative. to the situation. To take the problem is when you have a mixture of ochel and besolet. And another feature, the third feature I want to speak about is the timing. This is not doing its job here. The zman, right? So there's two options. There's miyad, which means for immediate use. And the opposite of miyad is la'achar zman, or for later. I'll just write it in English, later. For later use. So now, along come the sages and they say, you know what? You know what was forbidden? What's forbidden in the Talmud? The separating that they did is that they had mixtures of stones inside kernels, right? So they would take out the stones from the kernels. That's taking the bad from the good. And they did it in a farming, agricultural setting. It's part of the process of preparing the flour for long term. It's not like you're going to use it right now, this minute. It's not like you're baking bread the second and you do all these things. It's part of the process. And therefore, the sages came along and said, well, maybe when you're eating, it's different than when you're farming. If your intention is to use right away what you're separating, maybe it's allowed. Basically, they came up with this idea. One other thing that we have to be aware of, and that is the method. The method can be done with a vessel, or it can be done by hand. Right? Like we said, there was in that fourth category, when you had the flour, you used a sieve, right, a sifter. That's a vessel for separating. But you could also pick it out with your hands. Obviously, in the industrial framework, you're using vessels much more. You're using maybe the wind in the first case, or you're using that board with the knives, spikes on the bottom, and an animal, right? So those are all with vessels. So the rabbis came along and said, it's only prohibited if it's it only becomes similar to the original prohibitions if it doesn't have these. Let's say it this way: it is permitted to separate from a mixture, even if you have a mixture. Let's say you have a mixture. This is going to be what's prohibited. Permitted. Permitted. Okay? You're allowed to separate a mixture. Separate a mixture. If, and only if, anybody knows that notation? The double if? If and only if, you have three conditions. Number one, you separate the ochel from the psolet. You don't take out the stones, you take out the kernels. Don't take out the peas, you take out the rice. The rice that you want. I like the rice, right? I don't like. So you have to take out the good from the bad, not the bad from the good. Number two is it has to be biyad. So that's number three here. It has to be with your hands. Biyad. And it has to be for immediate use for miyad. Usually we say ochel, biyad, umiyad. The three conditions for allowing you to separate. So if I wanted to eat my rice without the peas, so if I'm going to eat it right away, now using a fork, just because I don't want to get my fingers dirty, is not considered to be a vessel. It's not a special vessel designated for separating. It's not a sifter. So you can use my fork, and if I'm going to eat right now my mixture of rice with peas, so I can actually, with my fork, I could separate. I can't push away the peas, but I can take the rice. That's the ochel for me. That's the ochel. Somebody else who likes peas, for him that's the ochel. But for me, I like the rice. So you can separate out the rice with your fork, with your hands, for immediate eating. I'm going to eat it right away. So I don't have to eat it as is because Shabbat I can't separate the peas from the rice. I can if I fulfill the three conditions: ochel, biyad, and miyad. It's for immediate use, and I'm using my hands, not a special tool, and I'm taking the good from the bad. In the original was taking out the bad from the good, and so that you're not allowed to do. But if you're taking the good from the bad, and all the conditions together, you put them together, you're permitted to separate. This is the basic principle of a borer, of separating. Let me just explain one more thing. The reason why is because if you're doing it for later, that's the way the original work was done. But for eating, derech achila, if it's part of when you eat, that's not considered to be a separate melacha of separating. So this is the principles behind separating. Now, I'll take your questions, but it gets complicated because sometimes, it's hard to define what's the ochel and what's the psolet. How soon does it have to be? We said miyad, for immediate use. What if you're preparing food for the meal and it's in half an hour? Can you do that? Half an hour before? How immediate does immediate have to be? And like I already started to say, do you have to use your hands? What if you use a spoon or a fork? Is that okay? So there's some details. But the principles are there. In general, you should be careful of separating mixtures, except if you can calculate that you have these three conditions. Okay, some questions.
We normally want to separate something that's small from something that's big.
It's easier. It's easier, right?
So what do you say about this on Shabbat? Like, if, for example, if you have peas, that's like lots and lots of peas, and you have like a little bit of rice, then of course you would want to take rice out. But if you have like huge pile of rice and like a little bit of peas, then what?
Good question. The sages deal with this at length. That's a very good question. What we're trying to do is to do it not in what's the normal way of separating. And so it makes sense that if you have a lot of the bad things, the normal way is to separate the good. So maybe it's prohibited because we want to do it not in a normal way of separating. Let me see where it is. He talks about this right here. Here. Page 211, it says in the second paragraph, when the psolet is minimal and it's easier to remove it from the mixture, the removing the psolet is still considered borer. So we're very careful about this. If something that the psolet, even if it's just a little bit, and it's easier to do, we still don't remove the psolet from the ochel. It's like taking the stones out of the kernels. An eggshell falls into your salad, you can't pick out the eggshell. Here's a classic example. Let's say you have soup. You're at a restaurant. For some reason it's Shabbat. Maybe you're at a hotel in Yam HaMelech. Okay? And you get served your soup. And you see what's in your soup?
A stone.
Oh my gosh. Waiter, there's a fly in my soup. Don't you know those jokes? There's a fly in my soup. What's a fly doing in my soup?
Eating, I guess.
The classic answer is, the waiter answers, he's doing the backstroke. What do you think he's doing? That's, but what do? Sometimes you have something that flies into your food. According to what we learned, you cannot pick up the fly and remove it because you're taking the psolet, the bad, from the good. You have to only take the good out. So you have to leave the fly in your soup.
I know what to do.
Yeah, what do you do?
Yeah, you can basically just put all the soup away while holding the fly like this.
You could, but that's a little complicated. There's another solution. That's a good solution. As long as you take the ochel from the psolet, you're okay. There's another trick that pro tip for separating flies out of soup on Shabbat. What's prohibited is when you're separating the bad from the good. But what if you don't only take the fly, you take a spoonful of soup together with the fly. So you're not just separating the bad, you're taking a chunk of the soup, part of the soup, similar to what you said. You take part of the soup and you separate it out. So now you're not separating only the bad from the good, you're separating the bad and the good from the good. And that's allowed. So usually that's what you do. You take a spoonful, which includes some of the soup or some of the rice, whatever, and that you can separate off. You're not explicitly taking bad from good, and that's what you do. But of course, some people are disgusted, and they just want to throw out the whole soup and get a new bowl. It's up to you. Some people are more finicky.
But you see, if the fly is in the soup, that means that the soup which is around is also bad now. So there's germs coming
maybe,
out of the fly.
yes.
So basically, if you take a spoon of the soup and the fly is in the middle, this means that all the soup around is spoiled. So you're basically taking a piece of bad soup out of your good soup.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. There's different sensitivities. Most people, assume that it's the fly we don't want to eat, but the soup is still going to be okay. Especially, how long it's been there. If it's been, doing laps back and forth, then maybe it's just disgusting. The whole thing. So don't do anything which is disgusting. There's a law. You're not allowed to eat disgusting food. So by all means, if it's disgusting, just throw the whole thing out. But if you don't have that option, or you don't care, it's okay, a fly fell in, you take it out. Don't pick it out by itself. Sometimes I make Kiddush cup. I'm about to make Kiddush. I look and see, a mosquito fell in. You cannot just pick it out with your hand. You have to take a spoon or spill it out together with some of the wine or some of the soup, whatever it is, so that you're not separating the bad from the good, but you're doing it, the bad and the good from the good. Okay, you had a question? You were waiting. Yeah. Gustav.
You remove a skin of fruit.
Excellent question.
And this is allowed?
Right. So one of the greatest rabbis of the 20th century was Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he said, well, pretty much we see that the Talmud never says anywhere that whenever you eat an orange on Shabbat, you have to cut it in half and scoop out the middle. Right? You could do that. If you want to avoid taking out the bad, right? The peel is bad. Nobody eats the peel. Most people. and so it's prohibited. You're taking the bad from the good. He said, well, we see that nobody requires you to do that. So it must be that peeling a fruit or a cucumber or an egg, it's considered to be derech achila. It's the way of eating. It's the way you eat a fruit, is by taking off the peel. That's nothing to do with farming. These examples that I showed you, it's so far removed from farming, and you do it, as part of eating, so it's allowed. So you're allowed to peel a fruit, and you're allowed to, some people say that it depends on the fruit. If some people eat like a cucumber, people eat a cucumber even with the peel. That's where all the nutrients are, by the way. Or if you join a cult, they give you cucumbers without the peel, I think, because you don't get the nutrients. In any case, so some people eat the cucumber with the peel. So taking off the peel is not really taking off something bad. And some people say you can even use a peeler. The peeler, you could say, oh, wait, a peeler is a vessel, right? It's a vessel. Really all it is a fancy knife. A knife is not a special vessel for for separating. And also, you're not really separating the bad from the good because people eat the peel. So some rabbis allow you to use a peeler for cucumbers. Not necessarily for every vegetable. Like most people, I think, don't eat carrots with the peel. Do you eat carrots? The peels of a carrot? Raw. You do. You do.
Well,
Yeah.
I eat.
You do also. Yeah? No, I don't do it. No.
But to just pick a fruit, for example, from a tree and eat, this is prohibited.
So that's another malacha. Picking it off the tree is prohibited. It's like harvesting.
Gathering.
It's harvesting. It's like cutting down That's one of the earlier malachot, was cutting down those stalks from the ground. So whether it's in the ground or it's on the tree, if it's connected organically, you're not allowed to detach it.
And if you keep for example, sometimes the wind makes like the.
If it blows it off by itself.
Or you kick the tree.
You kick the tree and it falls. Not allowed to use it on Shabbat because it's mukta. It was not prepared for use when Shabbat entered, and it becomes set aside from use until for the entire day. If it entered when the Shabbat entered, it was not ready to be used because it was still connected. So anyway, it falls off. Even if you don't pick it yourself, it's prohibited for the rest of the Shabbat.
In this case, for example, but then chocolate powder and milk, it's also prohibited.
That's a separate question. That might take us back to cooking. But if it's all cold, then you're not really cooking anything. That's an interesting question. To make cold chocolate milk is permitted. There's nothing wrong with mixing it up. There's other malachot, which we'll get to. Some people, if it creates a paste, if it creates like a thick sort of, something that's like a dough, then it might be a problem of lash. Lash is creating dough, kneading dough. That's one of the 39 categories of work. But when you make chocolate milk to drink, it's still liquid. It's just tasty liquid. It's just sugary, and that's not prohibited. The other problem might be that you're coloring it, but in general, when it comes to foods, we don't have to worry about dyeing. Dyeing is one of the 39 categories of work, to dye like a material. But food, you can be lenient, and therefore you are allowed to make cold chocolate milk. Hot, to use hot water, you might be cooking it. It depends if that powder has been pre-cooked or not. Kli shlishi might be okay. If you use kli shlishi, then, and for the most part, I believe that chocolate is already cooked. And so it's probably okay to make chocolate milk even in hot water, hot chocolate on Shabbat. But just to be safe, use a kli shlishi. That's good questions. Somebody else wanted to, Israel. Yeah.
The question is, for example, I eat the chicken. I eat half. I can finish whole. Is it separate? Or
No.
I should
No, that's not separate.
not separate.
First of all, you're eating what you want.
Okay.
That's allowed, right?
Oh, okay.
You're taking the good from the bad. Whatever you leave over, you're not even really separating. You're just eating. If it's part of the process of eating, it's allowed. So that's no problem. You don't have to finish everything. I mean, maybe your mother. When I grew up in Canada, they wanted the kids to finish all their food. So they said, how can you leave over food? You're wasting food. They're starving people in Africa. And then at some point we were saying, well, they're starving people in China. So you can't leave, coming from China, you're going to leave over food? No. So that's a separate issue. You shouldn't be wasteful, but you don't have to.
But there is also.
I won't tell my mother on you, okay, if you don't finish your chicken.
Which says that you throw the old food for the new food, and this is like a huge blessing that was said on one of the mountains. Remember, in Torah.
It's actually a pasuk in Amos, and what they're referring to there is that when you have crops, usually you have seasons where you plant and then they grow and then they harvest and then you put them in the storehouses and then you plant again and you have another crop, right? So the Amos says, you know what's going to happen because you're going to have so much plenty. You're gonna have your storehouses filled, and you're gonna plant a new crop, and it's gonna grow, and then you're gonna harvest it. but you have so much, your storehouses are still full. You won't have where to put the new stuff. Because the old stuff there's so much blessing that there's over plenty. That's the pasuk in Amos I think you're referring to, Yaakov.
Yeah.
So you'll have to take out the old to make room for the new. That's a beautiful blessing of the prophet Amos, who lived in Tekoa, by the way. The prophet Amos from my town. Another question. Somebody else wanted to say? Yeah.
How to definition good fat? For example, the chicken, the skin, and the bone, and the meat. Some people like skin, some people don't like.
Right.
If I want, for example, I want to eat the bone, I should separate the bone. Please, I don't eat it this way.
The opposite.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to separate off the bad, what you're not going to eat. You're supposed to take the chicken from the bone, the good from the bad.
Yeah.
So we're going to leave the bones. So you don't first separate out the bones. That's prohibited. That would be separating off of the bad from the good. Right? Same thing with the skin. If you don't eat skin, some people don't eat it. Think it's got all sorts of chemicals in it. They think it's just fat. It is fatty. It's bad for you. It gives you cholesterol. Whatever it is, you don't eat, or you don't like the taste of it. You like the chicken itself, not the skin. So for you should not peel off the skin and put it aside. That's prohibited. Just like you should not take out the bone and put it aside. Don't do that. That's borer. That's separating. Eat the chicken from the bone. Eat the chicken and leave the skin on the plate.
I'm sorry, what's your question?
No, I forgot.
That's okay. But it's a good question. There is an exception to the rule where you see that the rules are very clear. I taught you basically one rule, that you have 3 conditions to make it permitted. Sometimes the rules have to be relaxed. And the classic example was when you're eating, not chicken, but when you're eating fish. Big debate about it. Some people say, what did we learn last week? That eating fish is really important on Shabbat. The Arizal said that you have to eat fish, even 3 meals. You should have fish at each meal. So, what happens when you eat fish? Many times when you eat fish, there's bones in the fish. Now, what do you usually do during the week? You pick out the bone and you eat the flesh. Shabbat, you're not allowed to take out the bone and eat the flesh. So some people say that's why the Jewish community developed something called gefilte fish. Before Shabbat, you process the fish, you take out all the bones, and then on Shabbat you eat a fish, which you don't have to separate. This is the source, a halachic source for a very Jewish food called the gefilte fish. There are patties, basically fish patties, pre-made, where all the bones have been taken out. But you don't have to eat gefilte fish. You're allowed to eat fish. But what do we do with the separating? Some rabbis say, you are not allowed to take out the bones. You have to eat the flesh and leave the bones on your plate. Just like I said with the chicken right now, right? You leave the bones, leave what you're not going to eat, and take away the good stuff. And in other words, eat the good from the bad. Some rabbis say, wait a minute here. It's too hard sometimes. You eat a fish that has a lot of bones in it. It's almost impossible to pick at it. And what's the normal way? Many people do. You take a chunk of fish, you put it in your mouth, and in your mouth, you pull out the bone. If you feel there's a bone, you take it out. They say, well, that's got to be allowed because that's not separating like in the field. It's in your mouth. That's definitely part of the way you eat. It's not part of the way that you're processing, the produce for long term. That's for sure part of the process of eating. It's in your mouth. And so most rabbis say that's allowed. You can eat the fish, put it in your mouth, you take a bite. If you feel a bone, you take it out. That's allowed. On your plate, some rabbis allow it because they say that's just the normal way of eating fish. It's impossible just to pull out the flesh. Some rabbis say, yeah, you should try. Just like with the chicken, try to leave the bones on your plate, only eat the flesh. But I think most rabbis agree that if you have it in your mouth and you need to pull out the bone, that's not a problem of separating. Even though you actually are taking the psolet from the ochel, the bad from the good. Yeah.
So what about in a situation where, like, with my son, he's only a year and a half, giving him the fish, I have to take the bones out because
right.
he can't.
Right, exactly. So you have to be sure to take the good from the bad.
Okay.
Don't pull out the bones, pull out the good part of
the
it.
fish up and then I would see it?
That's a separate question of mashing. Is that one of the 39 categories of work? We saw grinding. You saw a picture of somebody grinding up the kernels. So some people say whenever you're taking a large object and you're making it into small little particles, that's grinding. And so you have to be careful with mashing up chicken or fish or food. So then we get into the definition. It's another malacha called of grinding. What are the parameters of grinding? If you do it not in the normal way, just like we were saying here, the normal way is to take the bad out of the good. If you do the good out of the bad, or the normal way is to do it for later on. But if you're doing it for immediate use, that's not the normal way, right? Same thing with the grinding. Some people say normal way to grind food is with a mortar and pestle, right? You have a special machine or a stone that you grind with using your fork. Well, fork is sometimes used. Some people say you use the back of the fork. Just use the handle. Whatever, you make some kind of a change when you're mashing things up. Obviously, for a baby, he needs to eat, right? So there's room to be lenient when it's only a rabbinic prohibition. And so for babies, there's more, or can you mash a banana? Right? There's a lot of food, a lot of babies eat bananas.
He's in the hole.
He's a big boy already, okay.
He screams if he doesn't get it.
Okay, good. Give him the whole banana, by all means. But when he was smaller, at some stage, you had to mash it up for him. So you're allowed to mash a banana, for example, with the back of the spoon. Or, and not in the normal way. But that's another halacha of grinding. We'll get to that, B'ezrat Hashem, as well. Okay, anything else about separating? A lot of people eat in Israel. I don't know if you noticed this. You got to go. Sure, yeah. A lot of people notice in Israel. A lot of people like eating. We mentioned gefilte fish is a Jewish food for Shabbat. What other Jewish foods are there for Shabbat, which are like standard?
Potatoes.
Potatoes, sure. Cholent, you make a stew. Of course, challah, right? Those are Jewish foods. Here in Israel, it's almost become standard. I think it's a Middle Eastern thing. When you get ready for Shabbat, you buy some pitzuchim, nuts, sunflower seeds, pistachios, cashews, things that you like, finger food that you eat. And this is very popular. Can you crack open your sunflower seeds on Shabbat? Well, just like we said with the orange, just the normal way of eating an orange is peeling off the peel and then taking the orange from the inside. Same thing here. You peel off the shell and you eat the seed. If it's part of the eating process, if you want to do it before the meal, some people serve only the seeds, the cracked, shelled, right? That might be a problem on Shabbat if it's ahead of time.
Eating sunflower seeds, you're not allowed on Shabbat to do it with your teeth because there's a chance that you might damage your teeth.
You're making up stuff now. Yes, you are.
We're not allowed to eat the meat and the fish together for the reason of the bones in the fish being dangerous.
That is not made up. That's in the Talmud. But it doesn't say anywhere that you have to be fearful that your teeth will get broken.
Well, okay, if you're brushing your teeth on Shabbat, then you're supposed to use the soft teeth brush so that you're not damaging your,
Gums.
Yeah.
Your gums, right. That's because you're not allowed to draw blood. But when you crack nuts, do you ever draw blood? I've never heard
No,
of
there
such
is
a
no
thing.
blood. There is,
So
you
what's
know,
the problem?
There is still
So what's the problem?
I was told by someone that people who do it very regularly, they have very visible damage in their teeth.
That's news to me. I've never heard of such a prohibition that you're not allowed to eat nuts because you could
No,
damage your
I'm
teeth.
saying about the sunflower nuts, and that you're not supposed to be opening them with your teeth. You can eat them, but you're not supposed to be opening them with your teeth.
I don't know. I think the common.
Hands.
Never heard of such a thing. Very interesting. I think it's very, very common. Some people who are very used to, they grow up eating sunflower seeds, they don't even peel it apart with their fingers, right? You put the whole seed in your mouth, and somehow with your tongue and your teeth, you crack it inside your mouth, and then you spit out the seeds, right? That's the normal way of eating it. It's allowed. You're going in?
No, not right away.
Not right away.
I gotta go get some stuff.
Get some stuff.
For now. I'll be back later.
But you will be back later. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to see you. Welcome back. Seder, we'll be in touch. Seder. Okay, great, Ezra. Thanks for coming in. Lovely. Amazing. See you later. It's not an easy decision to come back, leave your wife and kids in Chutz La'aretz and come to fight and risk your life. I got many calls, with tears. The wife doesn't want them to go. Yes, no, it's dangerous. It's a scary business. Baruch Hashem, he made this decision. Here he is. Hopefully, he'll be safe and he'll do good things for the Jewish people, for all of us. Okay, good. So these are the laws of separating. By the way, so we talked about most of the laws of separating. You can crack nuts. If you want, you can see on page 228. We don't do it ahead of time, but if you're part of the eating process is taking off the shell, it's allowed. Just like we said, with the egg, you can peel an egg, you can peel an orange, etc. Enough said, I think, about the laws of Borer. You should be aware that the general, always look for these three things. Using not a special tool, so you're doing it with your hand, for immediate use, and you take the good from the bad, not the bad from the good. Okay? Then it's allowed. Sometimes, I don't know if you're going back to the hotel, sometimes they have, but even in yeshiva, sometimes they have self-serve. And, sometimes they have, like, for say, green beans and a sauce. Or peas. I'm back to the peas today. I don't know why. You have peas and they're in a sauce. So now you want to eat only the peas and only the beans, not the sauce. Sometimes they use a special serving spoon that has slots in it. You know what I'm talking about? And so basically, it's like a little sifter. You can put your spoon in, and all of the peas will remain, or the green beans will be in the spoon, but all the liquid drips out. And they make them, the spoons, slotted spoons, especially for that, so that you can have your food and not have the liquid. That's a problem, because before you separate it out, they're all together in a mixture. And it's true, you're taking the good from the bad for immediate use, but the problem is you're using a spoon, this special slotted spoon. It's best not to use that on Shabbat. There's some rabbis which allow it, but I think it's best not to do that because that's a form of separating. Okay, good. All right. Something to be aware of. Some kashruyot, when they're giving rabbinic supervision to an institution, they'll make this a condition that they don't use slotted spoons on Shabbat. Some people are not so careful about this specific issue, but you should know about it yourself. Okay, there's a whole nother chapter here about preparing foods, a lot of details. What I would like to show you as, which is very common, is on page 243. We said that dash, threshing, separating the kernels from where they grow is a problem. That's why it's prohibited to squeeze a lemon into your cup, because you're taking the juice from the fruit, from where it grew, from where it's not natural places. And that's why it's actually a problem to milk a cow. You're taking the milk from the udders. That's where they grow. That's where its normal place is. It's a rabbinic. Some people say it's rabbinic. Some people say it's biblically prohibited to squeeze out, or if you let's say you don't have wine, you want to take some grapes, squeeze the grapes. I have grape juice. I can make kiddush. What a big mitzvah to make kiddush on Shabbat. Do that before Shabbat. On Shabbat, it's a tolada of dash. It's called mefarek. It's a problem to squeeze out. Some people say it's only prohibited with grapes and olives, where they're designed to make wine and olives. If you squeeze out, an orange to make orange juice, that's not normally. Most people eat oranges, not the juice. But it's prohibited one way or the other to squeeze out fruit.
I'm
sorry,
Shabbat. About
yes.
milking, it sounds kind of strange, because people that like farmers and have like cows, they what do they do? Because if you don't milk the cow might get sick and even die.
Exactly.
There's like lots and lots of milk.
That's right.
Some cows giving like a bucket of milk or 2 buckets of milk. Imagine
That's
carrying that all the day.
You're right. It's a big problem. The only reason you're allowed to milk the cow on Shabbat is because we're not allowed to cause the cow pain. Tsar ba'alei chayim. You're not allowed to cause pain to animals. So we have to milk them, because otherwise they'll explode. They're used to being milked every day, but we're not allowed to use that milk.
So if you're not drinking it immediately, then you're supposed to give it to animals or something. I don't know.
You have to throw it out. Now there is a system where there's a special type of kashrut where they are careful to not use the milk that was milked on Shabbat. Now there is a way to milk a cow legally.
Oh yeah, you can put the baby cow, so the baby cow will milk the cow.
Better than that. They don't have so many babies. That's not so practical. We mentioned before that when we have no other solution, we can use a non-Jew. Now I don't know where the Thailand workers are, but a lot of the dairy farms have a whole team of non-Jewish workers that they milk the cows on Shabbat. Now, the truth is, today most milking is done by a machine. There's still a problem hooking on that there's a machine that sort of milks the cow. You attach the udders to some kind of a vacuum, to some kind of a electric device with like these pipes or tubes, and then it automatically does that same motion that milking is, and then but the problem is you still got to connect it on Shabbat. You have to connect and disconnect it. Yes.
Actually, the cows have a place they're supposed to go to, and they basically connect themselves. You even don't have to connect.
I've never heard that's possible.
That's how the Israel farming works.
You've seen that?
This thing, but machines. My grandparents are farmers.
Yeah.
They use this for 30 years in butter machines, but
somebody has to connect them.
Yeah, but today you have this is automatically.
That's amazing.
Came at 5 in the morning and 5 in the sundown. The thing cleans
cleans the udders.
Yeah, automatically.
Automatic that would be amazing. We should use that in Israel. I've never heard of that being used in Israel. In Israel, we have somebody who's in charge of at least connecting the animal, and then usually to get the milking process going, usually you have to give one tug or one pull on the udders. And that first tug, like I said, we try not to use the milk from that milking. But the rest of them, they're done by a machine. It's only the first tug that you have to make sure that tug, the milk that comes out of it, is not used. Sometimes you could milk into you put into the bucket that you milk into, you put some soap in there, so that ruins the milk. So whatever was milked from that first milking, that goes to waste. But then the rest of them, that's already being done by a machine, and that's being done automatically. So if you have a way to even connect them automatically, that's amazing. For Hilchot Shabbat, that's much better, because it's not being done by in violation of Shabbat by a Jew, and you don't need to have Thailandi workers or other types of non-Jewish workers that'll help you out in this circumstance. But this is a very unique story for farmers, and most of us are not farmers. But we all like to put lemon on our fish or on our salad. So what is that allowed? So here we have an interesting halacha. Halacha says as follows. Now, first of all, lemons are not the same thing as grapes or olives. Grapes or olives, they're designed for squeezing, for getting the juice, so it's much more severe. But a lemon is used for eating. It's not only for making lemonade. You have lemons make lemonade, they say. But so the halacha says as follows. If you squeeze a lemon into an empty cup or into a cup with liquid in it, so then the liquid that comes out of the lemon becomes a liquid, becomes part of the liquid. And basically what you're doing, it retains its status as liquid, and you're taking liquid out of the solid. And that's a problem, because you're basically, like I said, taking the fruit from where it grows. The juice comes from the lemon. But if you juice the lemon directly onto food, onto your salad or onto your fish, so then we don't really have separate juice from the lemon. Immediately becomes part of the food, becomes part of the fish, becomes part of the salad. And so you're not really separating, there's that stage where you're taking liquid from a solid doesn't really have any discrete or distinct time period when it turns into liquid from a solid. And that's allowed. So when my wife makes dressing for the salad on Shabbat, she squeezes the lemon directly onto the food, not into a bowl or an empty bowl, or I don't use it for my tea. But if it's directly onto food, it can be squeezed. There's only one problem. Many times, I don't know if you guys are cooks or if you do, so when you squeeze a lemon, what comes out? Seeds, together with the juice. So sometimes what you do is you put your hand underneath, your hand catches the seeds, and the juice goes down. It's the problem. You're separating out the seeds, and that's a bigger problem on Shabbat. Let's see what he says here on page 244. One may not juice a fruit for the purpose of extracting its juice in order to drink it. However, if the purpose is to add flavor to food, one may juice fruit directly into food. So in such a case, the squeezing is never viewed as producing a discrete quantity of liquid. That juice that is considered part of one food is simply transferred to another food. Therefore, one may squeeze grapes into food, a lemon into vegetable salad, an orange into grated carrots. Similarly, a lemon may be squeezed onto fried fish, even though the juice is not absorbed by the fish. Since it is meant to flavor the dish, it is secondary to it and considered part of it. If one wishes to make lemonade, that's a bigger problem. What does it say here about the pits? It doesn't refer to the pits. I think if you use your hand and you basically squeeze the lemon over your hand, basically what you're trying to do is to, right, we said it's biyad and not with a vessel. So I think that can be allowed because there's no problem with the squeezing and there's no problem with the separating because you're using a hand, not a designed sifter or sieve. So then that's allowed. There's some details here about making lemonade, but we're not going to get into that. Okay, other questions? Yeah.
Well, actually, you're not allowed to squeeze anything, but here in this particular case, it means that you're going to eat it immediately. So that's like the natural process of eating. So it's not a problem, right? Because we're not allowed to even squeeze hair on Shabbat. For example, if we take in shower, we're not supposed to do this kind of moves.
It's good point. One melacha that we've been discussing up till now is the melacha of separating, and squeezing out liquid is one of those four parts, those four melachot. We said it's like dash, it's like separating the kernel from the stalk. But there is another problem with squeezing, and that may be connected to a whole nother part of the 39 categories of work. Which category of work? Where else do we have squeezing out liquid? It's in the category of work called milaben. If you remember, we had at the processing of textiles, you shear the wool, and then you have to clean the wool. That's this. You shear the wool, and then you milaben, you bleach it. You put it in soap, and then you squeeze the soap and the liquid out of it. So it's a problem. Squeezing the liquid out is part of the process of cleaning textiles as well. There's another squeezing. So we have to be careful of squeezing liquid out of a material, even if it's not organic, it's not a fruit or vegetable. So that's what we talked about up till now, right? Taking the liquid out of a lemon to make lemon juice is a problem. Like taking the milk out of the udder, it's a problem. But here, there's no organic material. The water doesn't grow inside the cloth or the wool. But there's another problem because it's part of the process of laundering, of cleaning the wool, which is another part of the 39 categories of work. And so it's a problem to squeeze liquid out of a material, not because of dash, but because of melaben. That's one of the 39 categories of work. So we don't wash our laundry, we don't do laundry on Shabbat. It's one of the 39 categories of work. And we're even careful not to squeeze liquids out of our beards, like you said, or our clothes. We're not allowed to launder our clothes. This is a big problem. A lot of people, I sometimes am a slob. When I eat, a little piece of food falls on my shirt. Oh, it ruins the shirt. It looks dirty. I want to look nice for Shabbat. The most natural thing, what does everybody do? You take a little bit of water and you pour it on and you start to scrub it out. Not allowed to on Shabbat. That's the category of work called cleaning, laundering clothes, melaben. So you're not allowed to put water on your clothes and to scrub it out. And you're not allowed to squeeze it out either. That's one another reason people say that it's problematic to bathe on Shabbat. Because sometimes when you bathe, you use a towel to soak up all the water. What some people do is they squeeze out their towel afterwards. That's not allowed either. That's why when you wash dishes on Shabbat, you have to be very careful not to use a sponge. If you use a sponge on Shabbat, the sponge, it has inside the fibers, it soaks up water, and then when you squeeze it, the water comes out. You're not allowed to use a sponge on Shabbat because it's like laundering. squeezing liquid from the material. Eidan's in his mind asking himself, wait a minute, I just saw the rabbi on Shabbat washing dishes with a sponge. I was waiting to explain this to you today. The sponge that we use is not a normal sponge. It's a special sponge designed for Shabbat use. Pretty much it's a useless sponge. It doesn't really soak up any water inside. It's just like some loose fibers that are attached next to each other, but it doesn't retain any water. So therefore, it's useful because it helps you scrub some of the the dirt from the plate, but it doesn't really retain any water, and so it's not a sponge where you're squeezing water out of it because it doesn't really stay inside. If you were to just put water in it and then hold it up, it would all the liquid would come out by its own without you squeezing it. So this is it looks like a sponge, but it's not really a sponge that retains water. And so, but you have to be careful not to squeeze out water from textiles as well. But it's not connected to the squeezing of lemons that we were talking about, or squeezing of grapes. But it's a similar process of squeezing. It looks the same from the outside. So when they tell you don't squeeze out your hair, also, or your beard, or your hair if you have long hair, sometimes when you take a shower, you squeeze it out. That's a problem on Shabbat. Not because of mefarek, but because of laundering. It's part of the process of laundering. So rabbinically, they say don't squeeze out, and that's why most Orthodox Jews, you may not be aware of this, most Orthodox Jews, in regular conditions, we bathe on Erev Shabbat to get ready for the Shabbat. We're all clean and fresh. And then for 25 hours, most Jews don't take a shower, they don't take a bath. Even if every morning you wake up and you take a bath. This morning I got up and I took a shower. Some people, that's part of their daily routine. We avoid it on Shabbat. You take your shower before Shabbat comes in. When Shabbat leaves, by all means, you could take a shower afterwards. Most people do. But usually we avoid the showering on Shabbat for a number of reasons. One of them is this issue of squeezing out the water. If it's a common part of bathing is people squeeze the water out of their beards or their hair or their towel, and we want to avoid any kind of something which would lead you to do. There's other problems of showering. There's other problems of bathing. We mentioned yesterday what could be the biggest problem in taking a shower on Shabbat?
Hot water.
Using the hot water. If you're not careful, just turning the tap might be cooking water. So, of course, what about cold water? There's many different details to go into this issue. But the standard practice that I'm just telling you is that we don't shower or bathe on Shabbat.
We have that kind of problem.
Yeah.
That when you put to hot water, the thing starts fire. Many houses have this, just a small tube.
Right.
And the fire starts. And so
right. Yeah, we spoke about it yesterday, that it's a big problem using, even when you have a boiler. When you have a big boiler, it could even be a problem because the cold water comes in whenever you take out the hot water. But it's true, there's other systems. You're mentioning a system where you don't even have a boiler. You just have like a small machine, and then every time you turn on the tap, the water comes in. It heats it up at that moment. There's different types of systems for creating hot water for your shower, for your use. And those are even more problematic. But even when you do have a big boiler of hot water, that could be problematic as well. Yeah.
The most common thing in every place in Israel, for those that wine, we spill it on the floor, right? Can we clean it and then?
You're saying that this just happens because people are messy. It's not a custom or anything. It's just things spill, of course.
Recently,
Yeah, it happens. People knock things over. Yeah. How do you clean up spills on Shabbat? That's the question. Good question. What's the problem? Which one of the 39 categories could you be violating when you're cleaning something up? So using a sponge is a problem. You're not allowed to soak it up with a sponge. Maybe soaking it up is okay, but you're going to squeeze it when you handle it. Every Shabbat, before Shabbat, I put my sponges, my regular sponges, away so that I don't get, by accident, I use only the special Shabbat ones that I bought. So you can't use a sponge because you might squeeze it out. But what are you supposed to do? There's spills everywhere. People are going to get wet. People are going to slip. It's disgusting. Ants are going to come if you spill grape juice there very quickly. Then the sun.
That's it.
So you're not allowed to squeeze it up. But if you don't actually squeeze it yourself, so you take a towel, a dish towel, or a rag, which is designed for cleaning. Smartut in Hebrew, they use it. Or in Yiddish, it's a shmata, people call it. And you take that shmata, here it is, here's our shmata, okay, here's our rag, and let's say I spill over here. See, right? Look. Oh no, it's wet. Somebody wants to sit there. What do? I cannot take this and rub it in try to soak it up. That's prohibited on Shabbat because when I'm pressing down, I'm pressing it in. You can see that here's squeezing. We don't do that on Shabbat. You're squeezing the liquid out of the textile. It's melaben. It's part of the problems of laundry. So what's the solution? I can't sit down. The solution is you take a rag and you put it on top and you let it be. And as you can see, you can maybe even drag it a little bit, but I'm not squeezing anything. I'm just letting the material soak up the liquid on its own. And then when it's all clean, I can pick it up from the corner carefully, not to squeeze it. Pick it up from the corner, and then I'll put it in the trash. Okay, afterwards I'll put this in the trash. Okay, so you have to be careful not to squeeze it with your hands. And if one is not enough, you bring another one, and you lay it down on top. Right, you can make sure that it's going to be in contact with the water, and then I'm not squeezing it. It soaks it up, and then you can you've soaked up your spill. That's one way. If you need to use a rag or paper, you can do that. Just be careful you don't squeeze it or you don't push down on it. And you can put it on top to make sure that it's in contact, but don't push it down. Okay, that's not allowed on Shabbat. Another way, which is probably better, is to not use textile. Don't use anything that has a material that's going to soak it up, because then you get in trouble with laundering. What do we have in Israel? What's the common tool for cleaning the house, for cleaning the floors?
This one, which is like
that's right, a squeegee. It's called a magav in Hebrew. It's like the windshield wiper, right? It's made out of rubber. It doesn't absorb liquid. And so you're pushing aside. It's like taking something like this. I'll put this away. And you push it. This is not absorbing anything. There's no problem with pushing the water away. And so you can use that on Shabbat to squeegee it up, and then either you take it outside or into the drain or wherever it is, and then that's a better way of cleaning things, but not using textile, right? Using something that doesn't absorb, as opposed to something that does absorb. But if you're not pushing it down, you can also soak it up, as long as you just place it on top and you don't push it down. Does that answer your question? How we clean up spills?
Oh, no. I saw maybe because of they fill it with the
Magav.
No, with the textile they absorb and then they do even squeeze it.
Not right. That's not right. They don't know the laws. Not everybody's as lucky as you are to study in Machon Meir. Yes.
About the tissue.
Towel, tissue,
So, but before Shabbat, I had to
Cut.
cut.
Pre-cut. Toilet paper comes on a roll, and it's a problem to cutting is one of the 39 categories of work. It's not exactly the same. It's only rabbinic, but we try to avoid cutting the toilet paper on Shabbat. So they sell pre-cut toilet paper. Yeah.
Most we do cut the and then pre-cut for the Shabbat, and then sometimes it's already finished.
What do you do when you don't have?
Yeah.
Right.
What should we do?
It's a good question. It's a good question. So if you don't have any more of the pre-cut toilet paper, you have to clean yourself. So, and maybe you could find a package of tissues, or maybe you could use something else. But if you don't, and all you have is toilet paper, most rabbis say what you do is you clean yourself, and then you try to cut it off the roll in an indirect manner. So if you have, for example, this is your toilet paper, and you wipe yourself over here, and then you put it into the toilet bowl, and then you flush the toilet. You're not going to tear it yourself, because that's what you're trying to avoid. But if you flush the toilet, and the seat is down, or the lid is down, so then the water itself will pull the toilet paper, and it does the cutting for you. So it's an indirect way of cutting the toilet paper off. And so that's what you should do, is to avoid cutting it directly. You cut it through flushing the toilet. If that's a possibility, that's best. If there's no possibility, if that's not viable, there is room to be lenient, maybe to cut it off using your elbows, or anything that's not the normal way of doing it. We said earlier that Shabbat, the laws of Shabbat is only melechet machshevet, right? There's 5 things we said are part of it being the malacha on Shabbat. It has to be intentional, has to be done in the normal way, and has to be done for permanent use. And so we try to avoid all those regular ways so that it takes it down onto a rabbinic level. And for a rabbinic level, there's room to be lenient when it's embarrassing, right? You need to clean yourself, hygiene. So there's room to be lenient if necessary. Also, when you're cutting off the toilet paper, usually the cutting that's prohibited in the Talmud is when you need both sides. Like when you cut a textile so that you can sew it back up together. That's the original context. But here, you don't want both sides. You only want one side, the side that you use. And you're just sort of ripping it off. A roll. The roll remains. And you don't really care where it is. By the way, there's in a roll of toilet paper, there's usually like a dotted line. Right? There's little pieces separated. It's like almost cut. So it's actually worse to cut on the dotted line, because that's where it's designed to be separated. So it's there is a melacha in the 39 categories when you have a piece of leather and then you want to cut it precisely to size, so that you usually have a mark. You make a mark in the leather with some kind of instrument, and then you cut on that line. It's like, so this perforation is essentially saying that's where it's best for you to cut. Cutting exactly, precisely, is more of a problem. So if you're going to have to cut over here, not on the dotted line, because that's more like precision cutting. Precision cutting is prohibited on Shabbat, and so it's best to not have precision cutting. Obviously, you should prepare and have a package of tissues, which are pre-cut. And even if you don't have the special toilet paper, which is pre-cut toilet paper, use a package of tissues, or use whatever you can without cutting on Shabbat. But that's another one of the 39 categories of work. We're putting them all together. Another question? Yeah.
What about the master?
Yeah. What about it?
For example, on Shabbat, I'm too cold. Can I adjust it?
That's a problem because it's electronics, right? We avoid using the electronics on Shabbat. Sometimes you just have to open the window, let the hot air come in, and then it'll be not as cold. It's not directly changing the setting yourself. So playing with this on Shabbat is prohibited. We don't do that. If somebody's sick, or somebody is old and they're gonna get sick, so then the best is if you have a non-Jew around you, you could ask them for help. But if someone's really gonna get sick, adjusting the temperature, if you do it not in the normal way, use your elbow.
Or a finger on the leg.
Then you're not doing it in the normal way, and there might be room to be lenient if someone's going to get sick. But if it's just a question of comfort, it's a little cold, put on a sweater, right? Or it's too hot, so go to another room. Or it's best to avoid touching the electronics on Shabbat, unless. So this is interesting. Most poskim say that you're allowed to move this, because it's mechanical. You're not changing anything in the electronics. You're not making the motor work harder or less hard. Even if you are, adjusting, like making the motor work a little bit, a few more volts or a few more watts, that's not really completing a circuit. We talked a little bit about electricity, how it's hard to define halachically. It's definitely not fire. It's definitely not fire, and it is prohibited in general. It's okay, I'll take it afterwards, after the class. It's fine. So we're finishing up. You're allowed to move a fan. If the fan is in one direction and you move it to the other fan, that's allowed according to many poskim. Some are machmir, but as long as you're not completing a circuit or directly using electronics, that's allowed. So you can adjust that. You can move that on Shabbat.
On the fan, we can adjust it to spin in
right.
one direction and then to stay.
Right. In most of those fans, it's a mechanical switch. Basically, it automatically will turn unless you stop it. What that button does is it stops mechanically. It just stops it from moving. It can't move. And if you release it, so then it can move automatically. So you're not really changing much by mechanically stopping it. And so that's allowed on Shabbat, according to most poskim. Yeah. Yes, last question for today.
Yeah.
And then we have to take a break.
We finish the wash hand, get the
paper towel. Yeah. So you wash. That. Your purpose here is not to squeeze out the paper towel. The purpose is to take the water from your hands, and that's allowed. But be careful not to squeeze it. Just sort of dry your hands. That's allowed on Shabbat.
But the paper, get the water, raise, break. Yeah.
That's no problem. You're not intending to cut it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if it comes apart as you're rubbing your hand. Sometimes when you pull it out, it by accident. That's allowed. It's okay. You're not intending to cut it. So that's allowed. It's no problem. No problem. All right. It's good I had tissues here for today, for the lesson. We'll stop here for today. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll do more Hilchot Shabbat tomorrow.
Thank you.